Hey guys, today we are on patch 7.2 Space Marine 2 to talk about the best builds for the Thunderhammer. Now, apologies in advance, I am currently sick. Gifted by Nurgle. So I'll try to get through this as best I can, but the Thunderhammer is a very popular weapon in this game. It's one of the strongest weapons the Imperium has in lore, and it's also just a lot of fun to use and has great synergy with the Assault class. Because the first thing I want to talk about here is that the Thunderhammer has the largest radius for your ground pound of any weapon available to the Assault class, so it has the most synergy with things like Zealous Blow. A ground pound kill restores jump packs charge by 10%. Even if you take something like Precision Strike, which will reduce your radius by 50%, this will still allow you to hop from Minora's Horde to Minora's Horde pretty much indefinitely, and sometimes even get like both your jump pack charges back in their entirety from like one ground pound. This is really good. This is like the best reason to use the Thunderhammer, because honestly, the Thunderhammer has like one good attack on it, which is the Aftershock. As far as like the ground slam goes and his light attack combo, this weapon is just not that good for like straight up smacking people unless you're just using the charge attack. So that's why, in my opinion, when we look at the perk tree, I always go down the bottom for Perpetual Strength into Aftershock, Fast Preparation. Aftershock preparation time is reduced by 30%. This is just mandatory as far as I'm concerned. And the other perk options here, like Armored Strength, if you have armor remaining, melee damage increases by 10%, and Calm Before the Storm, when preparing Aftershock, you take 10% less range damage. This isn't as valuable as just reduced time on your Aftershock, because Aftershock is your main damaging ability with this weapon to begin with. However, I should say that Calm Before the Storm, I'm fairly certain this is actually a typo, and this is just like a flat-out 10% damage reduction, not simply range damage. So they kind of messed up on that, but still, I think Fast Preparation is just much better. And really, all you want on the Thunderhammer is damage, which is why the Relic Block version is the best version of this weapon, in my opinion. This one hits the breakpoints to one-shot Extremis and to also one-shot Majoris. You can one-shot Majoris with the proper perk setups on the balanced version of the Artificer one, though you do lose out on all speed. Granted, speed, it doesn't matter too much because speed does not affect your Aftershock preparation time, only like your normal attacks. Still, I think you're just kind of like neutering your your Thunderhammer by not taking the block version, because Adrenaline Rush stacks also count for your ground pound. So as far as damage is concerned, you just want damage. This is like my preferred setup, would just be go down here, take Perpetual Strength, go up again, take more Perpetual Strength for 5%, Extremis Slayer 15% against Extremis, and then we get Reclamation, Aftershock, and Ground Slam restores 100% more contested health. This is pretty noticeable that even when you use Aftershock and like the initial slap of your weapon before you even bring down the hammer, this will still benefit from Reclamation in my experience. So 100% more contested health, this is actually pretty decent. It's not like amazing, it's not remotely as good as, say, the Swift Recovery is for the Chainsword, but it's still pretty decent. It still helps you a lot because you do use Aftershock quite a bit, and Aftershock's initial hit will almost always send a Minoris into Gunstrike range, so that's really good for us. And the bottom tree here for Ground Slam, area of effect radius increases by 50%, and like one more Ground Slam. Ground Slam, unfortunately, doesn't have the contested health recovery to be super valuable to us, and even if we wanted it to, we can't get like the full benefit of Ground Slam and its extra attacks with the contested health recovery at the same time, which is kind of unfortunate because I do like Ground Slam. It is useful at times, it's just not as good as Aftershock, and that's just kind of, that's a negative in my opinion. Now, offense initiated, if your armor is fully depleted, this weapon deals 10% more melee damage. More melee damage is just more melee damage. You get your armor depleted on this thing semi-regularly, though the Assault class, it does have 3 armor bars instead of, say, like 2 for the Vanguard and Sniper. Still, this will happen, and this is just more damage. Now, as far as the Brace Preparation perk is concerned, while preparing Aftershock, you do lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back. This weapon doesn't really need this perk at all, because first of all, the Aftershock on the Thunderhammer already has like a built-in hyper armor during its charge up, so this is already kind of redundant, and even if it didn't, we already have now the prestige perk Adrenaline Boost, which is after a perfectly timed parry, block, or dodge. You do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. So this is just already doing more than this perk would pretty much ever do for us, so I would pretty much just never take this. This is just super redundant. We already have better versions of this perk in our prestige tree and built into the Thunderhammer. Now, as far as the perks I would go for after this, I would just take, again, Perpetual Strength, more melee damage. You can take, after Aftershock, after hitting an enemy with Aftershock, you deal 10% more melee damage for 10 seconds. 10 seconds is a pretty long uptime. Personally, I take Majora's Slayer because I just like doing more Majora's damage flat out, but there are definitely arguments for both of these if you want to take this. Now, the next perk we have here is Kill Streak. After killing 7 enemies in rapid succession with a light combo, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 5 seconds. Cooldown's 10 seconds. Unfortunately, this one doesn't really do a lot for us, again, because we already have this built into our weapon for the most part, and our prestige perks, but, you know, more knockback resist, this can sometimes help if you just find, like, a Minora's Horde, but overall, the only things that really knock you back in this game are going to be, like, Extremis and Majora's anyways, so it's just, like, a perk we have to take to go further down the tree. Now, Aftershock improved. Aftershock gains an additional smash. I think this perk is amazing, because this will let your Aftershock, which is your main damage dealer outside your ground pound, actually go further, do more damage, slam on bosses. It's a pretty great perk. And some people don't like this. Some people like the regular slam more, but like the regular slam, there are like some bugs with it. Like it doesn't get the proper damage bonuses off of like its initial hit. Like you have to do like the full hit to actually get some proper smash on the enemies. I can probably go more into that in a different video, but overall, I think Aftershock Improved is really good, and it kind of goes right where we want it to, which is into Minora's Slayer. Well, we don't really want Minora's Slayer as much on this one, because usually Minoras just get ground pounded into oblivion, and as far as I know, I don't think this actually hits any breakpoints on the Thunderhammer. It definitely doesn't on the Power Sword. I know it doesn't on the Power Sword, but I don't know if it does it on the Thunderhammer. But Majora's Slayer, melee damage against Majora's level enemies increases by 10%. This is just more Majora's damage. Like I said before, if you really, really want to, you could just go into Aftershock instead, or alternatively, you could just take something like the top tree and go into Aftershock. But as far as the top tree is concerned, while performing a light combo, you take 15% less range damage. Light combos with this weapon suck ass anyways, and like really, you have to perfectly position yourself to not get smacked by Minora's Hordes in the first place using this, and patience rewarded when your health is below 30%. A fully prepared Aftershock hit restores 1 armor segment. This is just not that great. Honestly, if they want this perk to compete with like Aftershock Improved, this should just be 1 armor restore on fully charged Aftershock, in my opinion. I don't even think this weapon would be broken with that. Maybe that's like a little too far to some people, but that's just my opinion. I think this perk just would benefit more from like a higher health total to start functioning, because really you don't want to be that low on the Assault class. This isn't like Vanguard that has like healing and such. Now, the other two here, Reeling Blow, enemies hit by Pommel Smash deal 30% less damage for 4 seconds. Cooldown is 10 seconds. 10-second cooldown is a long time for a 4-second benefit, and like this just isn't very valuable to us. And also, Pommel Smash isn't really something you're going to do into like an Aftershock anyways, which is what will actually kill these enemies in the first place. So I don't think this is super valuable. Same thing with Dead End. Pommel Smash deals 50% more damage. 50% more damage on an attack we aren't really using for supreme damage on this weapon to begin with, because again, Aftershock is our damage dealer. These just aren't super valuable to me. I have used Dead End in the past, even prior to like the block buffs, but even now with the block buffs, I just don't think it's that valuable. So I would just go down these trees. I don't really think there's like a ton of options on the block Thunderhammer or like the Thunderhammer in general at the moment. It is kind of unfortunate. I think some of these perks, things like Aftershock or like the fast preparation, should just be incorporated into the base weapon, because they're just too valuable to not take, in my opinion, and it kind of makes some of these other trees redundant. And Ground Slam and things like the contested health recovery on this weapon should really be buffed as well, in my opinion, especially when we compare it to things like the Chainsword and even the Power Sword, or things like Power Restoration or Speed Restoration. Thunderhammer's a little lacking in that, and I feel like a weapon that hits as heavy as it does currently should restore more contested health without perks, in my opinion. Now, as far as perks are concerned, I would take Overcharge if you were using the non-balanced Artificer version, because at the moment, charge attacks getting 25% more melee damage, that is pretty massive. That lets us like absolutely slam people with the Aftershock, and if you also have Retribution, which is after you are grabbed or knocked back, you deal 25% more melee damage for 20 seconds. This will actually like let you one-shot on top of like knowledge of the enemy of most Majoras. And, you know, when we stack damage, like, this is really the main thing with the block Thunderhammer and the Thunderhammer in general, is just stack damage. Stacking damage with the Thunderhammer, that's what you're using it for. Precision Strike, Ground Pound deals 100% more damage, but its radius is reduced by 50%. And then things like Pride and Duty, after a finisher, Ground Pound deals 25% more damage for 10 seconds. When you kind of, like, stack all of these perks together, though I would also take Ample Ammunition here, just because we don't benefit a ton from like Wings of Flame on a Thunderhammer build because Zealous Blow is so good. But when you stack all of the damage dealing perks that this class has to offer for melee, including things like strategic strikes, you can pretty much just one-shot Extremis. And when I say one-shot, I don't mean like put them into execute and then slam down on them and like slap them in the face. I mean, you will one-shot them. Like, they will just vanish from the earth. They will evaporate, and that's just how it goes. Especially if you have 2 block charges, Adrenaline Rush charges from your block hammer, and then because those do stack with your ground pound. If you were to get a perfect block and you get your Adrenaline Rush stacks for the 30% damage and then 90% damage increase, they do stack onto your actual ground pound. So when you land on an Extremis, you will simply one-shot them. And that's really all there is to the Thunderhammer as far as I'm concerned. You just cycle Zealous Blow, which is a ground pound kill, restores jump pack charges by 10%. You slam this on enemies, and then you just stack melee damage on them. And that's really the big heavy hitting thing of the Thunderhammer in general, because the Thunderhammer is all about doing the big bonk. And that's really all there is to it. I think Retribution is probably the weakest perk in this tree. If you really want to take something like Balanced or the Balanced Artificer to hit those breakpoints to one-shot Majoris and maintain a parry, you could take Proven Efficiency, but really, again, when it comes to the Thunderhammer, the block version is really just the best in my opinion, and block weapons are pretty much the meta at the moment anyways, especially with this one. But if you want to take this one and then go for gun strikes, you can do that. You can even go for like Wings of Flame builds, but again, Zealous Blow, even with the balanced version, is still really, really good with the Thunderhammer because of that increased radius. But, you know, that's just my opinion. This is my favorite setup for the Thunderhammer currently. You can also take Retribution, even though I think it's the weakest one. I do think Auxiliary Arsenal and Consecutive Execution are both better perks than Retribution is, and you still get a lot of damage out of these trees, though you don't really get some of the breakpoints you would get from like a 20-second uptime on 25% more melee damage. So that is my preferred setup for the Thunderhammer currently. Really, the Thunderhammer is quite a simple weapon. You just cycle your ground pound with Zealous Blow and bonk heads. I think it's primarily good against Tyranids. You can use it against Chaos, but Assault as a class in general struggles more with Chaos than Tyranids anyways, and really most of your big benefits from your perks in your gear tree benefit from Tyranids more than Chaos to begin with. So that's just my opinion. Maybe you have a different one. Let me know in the comments below. If you really want to use something like a balanced hammer, you can go things like Gunstrike, Wings of Flame with a commitment, though I really just think we're not playing into the strengths of the Thunderhammer when we're going for like a fencing or a balanced version. Really, it's just a big old Zealous Blow bonk session, and that's really all this weapon's about. Anyways, guys, if you like content like this, subscribe for more, and thanks for watching. Peace.